All right, hello everyone. So this is quite an interesting session here because we sort of planned this as a small informal working group meeting, and it attracted so much interest that we're now in this gigantic hall. So this is really intended to sort of be a conversation and a thought about what comes next. I certainly welcome the input. More brains are always welcome. So thank you all for your interest in this session, but I hope you're not expecting us to give you every answer to every problem because we're not quite there yet. We're just looking to talk. So um, I'm Damian Katz. I'm primarily involved in the Viewfind project, and so I joined the Folio Discovery Working Group from the perspective of sharing Viewfind-related experience. So I have some observations to share and some thoughts, but they're from that outside perspective. So please feel free to take everything I say with a grain of salt. And I apologize for my ignorance in some areas, but I'll do my best to work around it. And others are welcome to correct me at any time. And I will let Marie introduce herself.
Yeah, my name is Marie Widigsson, and I'm working at Chalmers University Library in Sweden. And I'm a librarian with not so much technical knowledge. And I'm using Folio with the EBSCO discovery layer. So I have a totally librarian user perspective on this. And maybe, yeah, we could actually. Well, as Damien mentioned, this is actually a discovery integration subgroup kind of working meeting. But we thought it's so nice that you are here, and we thought we would present a little bit what we have done and where we are now and how we can move forward is the main thing. So we started meeting in October last year and have met until June this year. And it's been meeting convened by Uwe. We have identified and discussed and tried to prioritize various needs. And we have tried to have a discovery agnostic approach, not to focus on just one or two discovery systems. We have a Slack channel, discovery, and there's a Folio wiki page where everything is documented in, and yeah, you can continue. Great, thank you. Here is the original charge of the subgroup. We were to talk about real-time availability of items and circulation information, actually what you see in the discovery layer, what is available and so. Also, not highlighted here since we haven't talked a lot about it, availability, accessing and licensing information for e-resources. We have talked a lot about the patron APIs and patron functionality, not so much about harvesting records and exporting them. We were to update the requirements for these areas. And it says also here in the charts that we were to improve, it says improvement and the APIs. And that kinds of a thing we can come back to. And the timeline would actually be only 3 months. So we would end our work in December last year. We did not, since there was so much to talk about. Here are some examples. The brainstorm pages are actually, I'm not sure if you have looked into them, they are long lists of issues that are identified and some thoughts about them. More or less organized. Some has some Jiras connected to them. To the left, you can see who has entered them and some comments.
So where are we now after having met for several months and talked about some of the items in our charge? Well, we have a long list of issues, things we've identified that are needs for integration between Folio and Discovery. We've identified some Jira tickets that were already existing. I believe some have been either created or updated, but I think we have more issues in our wiki pages than we have Jira tickets. We find ourselves running up against some sort of technical and philosophical discussions about how the integration should work. Do we need the edge APIs? Do we need Okapi? Should we be using shared standards? I don't think there's any single one right answer to this because there are a lot of different use cases in play. So essentially, we've sort of reached a crossroads where we need to decide where we're going next. And the group meetings have been on creative pause since the spring when we realized that we had sort of reached the point where we had our documentation and we weren't sure how to go next. And I think one challenge is that there isn't currently a product owner for Discovery. So while we can make documentation and recommendations, we're not exactly sure what to do with them now that they sort of exist.
Yeah, here's I found on FOLIO Wiki a description of the product owner. So if anyone is interested, it's there.
So how do we move forward? One thing we clearly need to do is reach some further agreement on best practices and priorities. In terms of technical implementation, are we talking about defining best practices for integrating Discovery with Okapi? Are we talking about extending the edge APIs? Are we talking about building something new? Are we talking about all of these things because somebody needs each of them? And how do we prioritize that work? We need to figure out how to engage with the rest of the project to make things happen because we can certainly talk about what we need all day long, but I realize that tangible work needs to happen to get us there, and that requires, collaboration with and buy-in from other people. And we need to decide what the future is of the group that got this far. Do we continue in our current form, or do we need to engage with the project in some other way? And I think there are a variety of options there. But also, in talking about this, Marie and I tried to come up with a list of questions that need answering. And one thing that's clear is that this is a huge problem that needs to be broken down into smaller parts in order to become manageable. So, questions include, should we be focusing on specific systems first for a pragmatic approach? Should we be focusing on specific features first on the understanding that there might be multiple ways we need to approach those features to meet all the use cases? Who should be taking the next steps? Does this belong as part of a larger special interest group? Is there some existing part of the organization that we should be talking to? And how does this all fit into the product council? And maybe that there are really obvious answers to all these questions, because again, as I say, I'm a Folio outsider. I've just been sort of watching and participating in this process. But here I am in front of a huge group. So
and we have actually got a chat question that I think is very good. What are the Discovery platforms that already integrate, and how many libraries installations are using each one? Lisa Gonzalez. And actually, I don't know.
I certainly couldn't answer with very specific numbers, but certainly Viewfind has pretty robust support for Folio already and is in production use in a number of places. EDS integrates with it as well in some ways. And I also know there are some Blacklight users out there, but I think the Blacklight users are more taking an institution by institution approach. I'm not aware of a sort of standard Blacklight solution, but again, I'm not that in the loop on Blacklight, so scream at me if I'm wrong.
Yes, the follow-up question is also very valid. Once there is a product owner, what platform should they be concentrating on? It's a practical standpoint. And exactly, yeah.
Right, and I think that's one of the areas where the technical approach makes a difference, because Viewfind's current implementation is based on directly interfacing with Okapi, whereas the EDS approach is based on the edge APIs, and I think that has caused a divergence of focus, as it were. And I'm, theoretically not unwilling to give Viewfind the capability to use the edge APIs, but given that I have a working implementation right now, it's hard to justify doing that unless it's the agreed upon universal best practice and supports all the same functionality that I currently have today. And everyone's needs are unique. Again, I haven't spoken to a lot of blacklight folio people, so I'm not sure what approaches they're currently taking, but that would be interesting to know as well.
Are there any blacklighters here? No? Any EDS users? EDS with folio, yeah. And Viewfind? Yeah. And something else that we have don't know about? Oh, Lukita?
So I think we can move on to the next slide, which again was a start on brainstorming ideas on how to proceed, which Maria and I put together this morning. And this is just meant to start the conversation. And if ideas come in through the chat or from the room, we can type them directly into this slide. I don't know if they'll show in real time or not, but that will be interesting to discover. So, one thought was, do we need a smaller, more focused task force to pick out next steps? Because I think the discovery group was fairly large, and I don't know that everyone on it wishes to continue to serve. Maybe we need a new charge. Since we had a charge, we were able to succeed at some portions of it, but maybe we need to decide what the next step is and define that clearly, because at least from my perspective, the later meetings of the group started to lose focus because I don't think any of us knew what we were actually trying to do anymore. And I think we need to refocus and come up with concrete goals again. One idea also would be to put out a survey to implementers to get a little more data, which could help with prioritization, like our informal poll we just did of what discovery layers are people using, and maybe try to get a handle on what the actual problems people are facing are, because we certainly know theoretically what all of the possible things we might want to do are, and I think they're all valid, but what are the ones that are affecting the most people or that have the greatest impact, because that is obviously the logical place to start. It would also be good to talk to the technical people on the various discovery systems that are interfacing with Folio to get an idea of what approach they're taking and why, and maybe come to more consensus about approaches. And, we also talked about maybe we need to get some kind of funding for a project, because it's great to come up with lists of things we need done, but as I say, we need to actually do them. And I'm not sure how we get the capacity going, but this seems like something that's important to a large number of people. And maybe we need more resources to get it the attention. But again, I defer to Folio colleagues on whether that is necessary or sensible. I'm looking at this very much in the abstract. I also think there's something new in the chat. All right, so it says, as part of its original charter, did the group map out the different kinds of data required by a discovery layer and how, where Folio API's GraphQL provide that information? I see some areas of concern listed. I was wondering if part of the process was to identify overall data needs for different disclosures. Apologies if you already addressed this. I don't know how detail we went into every single data element, but I think we went through sort of the broad categories, and then we looked at whether the current data was available through Folio APIs or whether it was supported by Folio in any sense, because I think there are many cases where Folio has 90 or 95% of the capabilities that are needed, but there are edge cases here and there where there are gaps. And I think a lot of those were documented through this process. But I wouldn't say that we went to the level of detail of creating a spreadsheet of every data element used by ViewFind and then every data element available in Folio and cross-referencing or anything to that extent. Somewhere in the middle.
And we were focusing on the issues, the problems found, not on everything that was there.
Right. Though I think our list was broadly, what are all the functions we want? Mm. And I'm seeing multiple statements of support for some kind of a survey. So that's a potential logical next step.
I don't think this will update in real time, but I will bold that one.
Oh, what happened?
I have bolded it in the list.
Oh, it's not
but here. It's not updating.
Alas, the magic doesn't work.
Yeah, great. So maybe it can be in edit mode, and then it will be updated if you are in edit mode there.
I think I quit out and went back in, and then it appeared. Is that
okay? Fine. So, what do you think?
Well, a related question, again, I call out to the Folio expertise. If we were to develop a survey, because that could certainly be something that could be done by a small task force and then, relayed to a larger group, what would be the best way to communicate that to the Folio community effectively to get good response rate? Is there a best channel for that sort of thing? There is already a Slack channel for Discovery. It's actually called Discovery. So that would be great. See more chats popping up. Let's see. So the comment that seems like some of this is on the Folio side and some on the specific discovery tool side. This is really the crux of the problem rather than lack of PO. It's very hard to get traction on necessary changes to make discovery integrations better when there needs to be more collaboration or communication between the Folio and specific discovery tool side of things. I would agree. And, as I say, ViewFind has, I think, been pretty successful at getting this going, and that has been with the support of people on the Folio side, which is much appreciated. Also, the suggestion of broad posting on many of the major SIGs, which maybe could be coordinated through the product council, as was suggested. comment regarding a survey. The implementer SIG has previously been maintaining a list of FOLIO libraries, the integrations they were using, etc. The SIG has tapped this as a priority to get that updated. Might be a good shared task. I agree. Yeah, certainly if we could get a survey distributed, we could share that data back and it could be used to update the list. And we could use perhaps the existing list as a target for some of the survey distribution. So we've
vastly oversimplifying this. Keep in mind that I'm not on Folio right now. But everybody's got their own sort of unique needs. I don't know, everybody's got their own unique needs and their own unique ways of accomplishing the same needs. So with that caveat, I'm confused as to why if you took an API-based approach, you have about Viewfind and Blacklight or what have you. There's other open source discovery videos that I'm aware of, but wouldn't these same APIs essentially work? I mean, much if you say we're going to develop this API, does it matter if it's to accomplish this functionality? Does it matter if the person decides to implement it via Viewfind or Blacklight or whatever?
I think the essential challenge. Oh.
I should have run out with this, but could you please repeat the essentials of the questions?
I forget the room isn't mic'd. So sorry for the people at home. The question was, if there are essentially a set of APIs there that do particular functionality, why does it matter necessarily which discovery tool is consuming them as long as the functionality is there? Shouldn't it be possible for all the tools to just do things in simple ways? And I think that's largely true, but the sticking point I keep running into in conversations is this concept of edge APIs. So the idea is that Folio is built on top of Okapi, which has all of the core functionality of Folio in it. And so Viewfind works because it talks directly to Okapi and thus has access to the full functionality of Folio. But some services don't want to expose all of Okapi to discovery. There are edge APIs, which are different APIs built on top of the foundational APIs that expose a subset of the functionality, which I could conceivably see you wanting to do, well, for several reasons. One reason being maybe you don't want your Okapi to be open to some third party, but you don't mind having a smaller thing exposed. There's also been discussion about the fact that Okapi evolves over time, which can break integrations with discovery systems when things change. But if you define edge APIs that are used for this integration, then you can make sure that the edge APIs always work the same, even if the underlying Okapi APIs change. And this is where we get into some of the philosophical debates of, well, do we need to come up with rules about how Okapi changes or publishes its changes so that people can be responsible for integrating, or do we need to insulate it with edge APIs? If we do edge APIs, we're essentially doing the same work twice in a way. That's my argument against it, but I may be in the not advocating for edge APIs camp, but I know there are valid arguments on the other side of that. But I think that's sort of the crux of the issue. Does that help to answer the question? It's technical and annoying. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what have I missed here? Oh, suggestion to also target consortia in the survey. That's a good idea. Thinking from my perspective as a person planning a migration to Folio, good summary documents of the available options, functionalities, and deployment details would be nice. If they exist, happy to be told so. I think a lot of information does exist in the Folio wikis, but its completeness and findability may sometimes be variable. So asking on Slack is often a good way to get pointed in the right direction. And yes, there's a comment that the main problem of the current Edge modules is their incompleteness. So that's why I sort of see it as a fundamental decision of do we want to encourage the use of Edge modules, in which case we need to do a lot of work on Edge modules, or do we look at not using Edge modules, in which case we need to figure out the most appropriate ways to not use Edge modules. And there might be use cases where one approach or the other is more appropriate, which is why I made my statement of different use cases might have different approaches. I also see in the comment on the irony of findability being an issue in library technology documentation, yes. Speaking of APIs, there's also the possibility that the APIs are A, not performant enough for a real-time discovery layer, and B, do not return as much information as may be required by a particular institution's discovery layer, which seems almost like the opposing use case to Edge APIs. People seem to find workarounds in the form of caching or Folio GraphQL. The concerns around performance, scalability, what information is returned may cross different discovery layer implementations, so it may be interesting to ask across Viewfind, Blacklight, etc. So yeah, there are so many ways to do the same thing. And also, you know, I always hasten to note that sometimes I sound grumpy about Edge APIs, and that's the traditional grumpiness of the computer programmer who has working code and doesn't want to have to change it. But I am open to persuasion. I don't mean to prejudice anyone. Yes.
As a Viewfind using institution, I share that grumpiness. I guess I don't care that much about Edge APIs, you know, like, sure, okay. If there was one that did everything, great, but I don't care that much. I'm curious, since, you know, discovery layers are a specific thing, but they're also a client app. There's lots of different discovery layers that might use different parts of Folio, to the point that a quote unquote complete discovery layer API might ultimately be a edge over every single Folio API, depending on what you're trying to discover, which goes too far into ridiculousness. But what I'm more interested in maybe is there functionality that's beneficial to discovery layers that just doesn't exist in the Folio Okapi APIs at all right now, which would mean that it doesn't exist in Folio, because everything in Folio is in the Okapi APIs. You know, has this group identified that sort of very obviously discovery-oriented functionality that just Folio isn't doing yet?
Yes, we have, but not very many things, or not huge things, but there are definitely some things on the list that are features that just don't exist. And so solving that would be great. And I agree with your concern that sort of the logical end game of comprehensive Edge APIs is that you design a complete API and then you design a different complete API that does exactly the same thing by calling the first API. And I don't see the benefit of doing that, but I'd be happy to have one API that works for me.
Do we have any EDS developer here? I'm as an EDS user, I'm so curious how what is actually looking on the back and what's actually needed, because Damien is explaining about what you're using, a copy, and I know that EDS is using the Edge API, but maybe a combination of things depending on what it's supposed to do. And actually, I have no idea, and I think that lack of knowledge is, well, it's at least disturbing for me. I would like to have a kind of a broad understanding what it is.
I see a hand.
I kind of missed the beginning of that question, but you said EDS, Edge, OCopy, and at Texas A&M University, we actually wrote our own little middleware that talks to OCopy and the Edge modules to get the information that we need for ViewFind, and EBSCO actually uses our middleware to display the correct information in our EDS holdings. So that's how we solved it this year, but hopefully everything will catch up eventually.
That's really interesting. And I think that there are others kind of doing similar things that have middleware solutions as well. Shouldn't be needed though, I think.
There's also a new comment in the chat that says it seems that while EBSCO uses the Edge API for EDS, they're using OCopy for locate. Let's see. We've got 26 minutes left.
Not solved every problem yet.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So as an EDS user, at least without using any middleware, we are seeing some everyday problems with mainly actually patron functionality. We cannot tell the user when the last date to pick up a request is, or at which branch library to pick it up. And I don't know why. I know that one of these things are missing from the Edge API, but I don't know about the others. So in this brainstorms list, there are several other things of the same character. So it needs to be working better.
Kind of tangential. I'm a product owner for Discovery at the Library of Congress, and we're doing EDS. So I'm new to this conference. Caitlin was mentioning our UX prod tickets, but I've been like, how do I share our work? Because it's completely outside of the Jira board for EDS, for example. How do I connect with other people? I'm sorry, I'm going off, but Discovery means so many things, but I'm sure we're working on some of those issues currently that you just mentioned. So I would love to connect with this community, not only around this very fundamental challenge of like which way to go forward, it seems like, and how to make that decision, but how do we one of the pitches I wanted to make to the community is the library is doing a number of user research kickoffs to see like what are the gaps with end users, patrons as well with these services that we're using. What are things we want to explore? So I'm just pitching that out. If anybody wants us to do research and connect, we can help like prototype if you have a research question. And of course, with the BibFrame announcement, understanding what that also means with Discovery, hopefully that also kicks off a whole bunch of other questions around how it impacts the end user as well. Sorry for being totally off, but
not totally off at all, I think. So I didn't quite understand. You're doing your own work with making EDS works as discovery layer for Folio.
Yes.
Yeah, and
published, but of course, next month we have to understand if that fits our needs with EDS, locate, and Folio.
And then you were not talking about kind of building a middle layer or more out of the box. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in sort of the same boat. I mean, we're very, very early on. Right now in Galileo, we have multiple discovery OPAC layers. We have Primo for OPAC, we have Primo for discovery, we have EBSCO for discovery. We have our own home-built bento box approach that consumes EBSCO APIs and other APIs as well. And we're just sort of at the, how do we figure out, I mean, we're assuming that it needs to work for EDS at a minimum. That we need to have folio data being brought into EDS in order for EDS to be the discovery layer. But that work is largely going on in conversations between us and EBSCO. It's not going on in the folio community. And then there's locate, which we're like, well, do we need locate? And then we in the past, we've had viewfind, maybe viewfind. I mean, it's just, how do we figure this out? Yeah.
I would love to talk to both of you about viewfind, but not in this venue. I also see that in the chat, there's now some debate about whether or not locate uses edge APIs. So I think clarity is being sought. Also, it says, for any EDS/Folio users who want to connect, some of us are trying to use this Slack to connect, discuss common issues and approaches to advocating to EBSCO to fix issues or develop enhancements. And then there's a link to an invitation. So I don't know what the best way to get that available to everyone might be, but it looks like the Slack team is called EBSCO EDS.
I think I saw this conversation being brought up this summer in this EDS channel. And it's great, I think. I haven't had the time to answer yet, but that could be a place to communicate as well. But that's outside of the folio community. So maybe we should have that folio-specific communication within a folio community. Would it be beneficial to have, well, we have the Discovery Slack channel where we can talk about these things. Would it be beneficial to have smaller, more dedicated Slack channels for the different products?
There is, in fact, already a viewfind integration Slack channel as well. So it would certainly make sense to have Blacklight integration and EDS integration as well. I can't remember if the viewfind channel is private, but it doesn't need to be if it is.
But I think it's also good to have the common communication so we don't kind of fall into different, how do you say that in English? Silos only.
Yeah, shared common goal discussion is great, but having places to go into platform-specific detail is also great.
So, who would like to make a survey? Is the chat flowing over now?
No one is jumping at this golden opportunity, but
What?
oh, yay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ray, you're on. Someone else? We can, of course, post all this and other questions in the Slack channel.
Definitely.
For people to have some time to think. But I think it would be good to be a couple of people.
And can we get a volunteer to talk to product council once we have the survey? Since I know the idea came up in the room, does anyone want to be our liaison?
And I guess we would somehow, yes, someone is saying something.
So Uva's volunteering to continue to help.
So what would be the good question to ask in the survey? Apart, of course, who you are and what system you are using and planning to use. So we were thinking like a very small number of main identified issues or probable issues. Is there something else?
Or is that enough? Because people like filling out really short surveys. And they also really like complaining. So I think asking people what their pain points are is the easiest open-ended question to ask in a survey.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you have done the UX thing with love letter, breakup letter.
I have not.
Oh, it's so wonderful. You can find something that you write a letter to something like the copy machine, for example, and tell me, oh, dear copy machine, you have been serving me for etc. But now I'm thinking we are done with this. And this is really fun way of collecting a lot of information. So we could have that as an option as well.
So question from the chat is, in the survey, would we separate out inventory versus patron functionality or just be completely open-ended? I could see value in separating out those things. Or having a question of what area is most problematic for you, inventory or patron functionality or something else, or all of it. I mean, maybe that would be a good way to have a quick multiple choice question that somebody could answer if they don't want to fill out the free-form text, and then we get a little bit of data at least.
True, but I do think it's important to try to find the area with the interaction between Folio and the discovery system.
Right.
So not how the discovery system is good or bad in other ways.
I'm going to take a turn at walking out with the mic since I've just been standing there this whole time.
I think it might also be of value to not only have freeform and perhaps multiple choice, but then at the bottom, taking from that multiple choice, how valued you find each of those choices in the multiple choice. Because as at least at my institution, we're really interested in patrons now, but once we get that problem solved, it's a whole nother ball of wax. So I think it's just at that particular point, what's most important to you, and then going forward, how you value things, I think would be important to gauge from the community at large.
Thank you.
I think we have come to the conclusion to not kind of just continue the work of the sub-rogue, but we need to restart and have some new energy.
And I think if we do review the work that came out of this working group, that might help inform how we structure the survey as well, because we do have these lists that show specific things, and maybe we can highlight more multiple choice things to save people time while also offering free form. And it will be based on all the investigation that we've done so far.
Yes, that would make good use of it, I think. Yeah. Totally not comfortable with using this microphone. How you do it?
Well, in any case, it looks like we have 12 minutes remaining. I think we've come to some conclusions. I thank everyone for the conversation. I welcome any more input if people have last minute thoughts or just want me to hand you the microphone so you can complain about something discovery related or make a humorous observation. But I also think we could probably safely wrap up here and give everyone a little extra break time before the next session if that makes the most sense. And thank you all for being part of the largest small working group I've ever seen.